My son left me in a snowstorm behind the old county road sign. After telling a room full of people I was too confused to take care of myself, and the last thing he threw at my feet was my dead wife's cedar recipe box. He said, "Maybe the cold will clear your head, Dad." Then he drove away. The taillights of his black SUV disappeared into the white wind like two red eyes closing. And I stood there in my church shoes, no coat, no phone, my hands shaking so badly, I could not even pick up the box at first. Inside that little box were Ruth's recipes, her handwriting, the smell of cinnamon and paper, and a promise I had made to her the night before she died. I thought my son had finally taken everything, my dignity, my home, my granddaughter, my wife's memory. But there was one thing he did not know. Ruth had seen him coming long before I did. And the man who stepped out of the snow 10 minutes later was not a stranger. He was the bodyguard my wife had hired before she died. If you've ever been made to feel small by your own family, stay with me. Because what happened next changed everything I believed about love, blood, and justice. My name is Harold Mercer. I am 68 years old, and for 31 years I worked as a United States postal inspector in northern Minnesota. Most people do not know what that job really means. They think it is about missing packages and stolen birthday cards. Sometimes it is. But most of the time, it is about patterns, a signature that leans wrong, a delivery date that does not match the snow on a porch, a certified letter signed by a hand that was not in the room, a forwarding order made by someone who had no right to touch another person's mail. I built a life noticing small things. Then I got old, and my own family counted on me not noticing anything at all. My wife Ruth used to say I could hear a lie through a closed mailbox. She was a school librarian for almost 40 years. Small woman, strong spine, soft voice, and eyes that could quiet a whole room of noisy children without saying a word. She loved index cards, winter birds, black coffee, and our granddaughter Nora. The cedar recipe box was hers. It had a little blue snowflake painted on the lid. Ruth painted it herself one December when our son Miles was 16 and mad at the world. Back then, he had still sat at the kitchen table with us. Back then, he still let his mother touch his shoulder. Back then, I still believed every boy who grew cold could be warmed again if his father waited long enough. Ruth kept everything in that box. Her cocoa recipe, her chicken soup recipe, a cookie recipe Nora called Grandma's Soft Moons. She also kept little notes in there, grocery lists, appointment cards, names of children from school whose families needed help at Christmas. Ruth never wanted praise for kindness. She hid it under recipes. After she died, I kept that box on the kitchen shelf by the window. Every first snow, I took it down and made her cocoa. Not because it tasted better than anything else. It was just milk, cocoa powder, vanilla, cinnamon, and a pinch of salt. I made it because Ruth made me promise. "Harold," she whispered in the hospital, her hands already thinner than paper. "When the first snow comes, make the cocoa. Don't let this house forget us." I told her I would. And for 3 winters after she passed, I did. Nora came over for the first 2. She was 9 the first year, Ruth was gone. She wore a yellow hat with a pom-pom and carried a stuffed rabbit named Bean. She cried into her mug and said the steam looked like Grandma was breathing. The second year, she came quieter. Miles and his wife Elise dropped her off late and picked her up early. She kept asking if she could take one recipe card home. Not the cookie card, not the soup card. Just one blank card Ruth had scribbled a little bird on. I said yes. The third year, she did not come. Miles told me she had outgrown old rituals. That was the first lie. I just did not know it yet. My son Miles was 42 when all this happened. He had Ruth's cheekbones and my height, but not much else from either of us. He ran a private senior living placement company called Silver Harbor Solutions. He helped families place aging parents in care homes, or at least that was how he described it on television, interviews, and charity posters. In town, people called him compassionate. At church, women said Ruth would be proud at fundraisers. He spoke about protecting our elders with dignity. He wore expensive gray suits and touched people's elbows when he talked to them. He had that talent some men have, where they can make a lie sound like a responsibility. He never raised his voice in public. He never had to. He knew how to make concern feel like a cage. Elise, his wife, was polished in a different way. Blonde hair, neat nails, soft scarves, eyes always measuring the room. She ran the public face of his company. Photos, donor events, social media, little videos of Miles holding an old man's hand while piano music played underneath. Their daughter Nora had not inherited their shine. She was 11 then. Thin, watchful, always listening from doorways. She loved drawing houses with smoke coming out of chimneys. In every picture, the house had one yellow window. I asked her once why. So somebody knows where to come back, she said. That child had Ruth's heart. And that was why Miles could not stand her. Not loudly, not the way bad people act in movies. He did it with sighs, with labels, with little public corrections. Nora struggles with emotional regulation. Nora exaggerates. Nora gets attached to unhealthy things. She has a very active imagination. Every time he said it, Nora got smaller. I should have fought sooner. That is a sentence older men say, when it is too late to undo the first wound. I should have fought sooner. But grief makes a man slow. Not stupid, just slow. It wraps around your ankles. You can see the trouble across the room, but you reach it one breath too late. The night Miles left me in the snow began at the Winter Lantern Benefit at Lake Alder Lodge. It was the kind of event Ruth disliked and Miles loved. White tablecloths, fake pine garlands, local news camera by the entrance. Donors with name tags and warm coats. The benefit was for a new program Miles had created called Safe Harbor Families. It was supposed to help children caring for elderly relatives and seniors at risk of neglect. The irony still makes my chest hurt. Miles had insisted I come. You're part of the story, Dad, he told me on the phone. Mom's memory matters to people. It'll look good for the foundation if you're there. Not, it will be good to see you. Not Nora wants you there. It'll look good. I almost said no. The first snow of the year had started falling that morning, and I wanted to stay home, take down Ruth's box and make cocoa. But then Nora called from Elise's phone. Grandpa? Her voice was small. Are you coming tonight? Do you want me to? She did not answer right away. Then she whispered, please bring Grandma's box. I held the phone tighter. Why, sweetheart? I just want to see it. In the background, Elise said, Nora, don't be strange. The line went dead. So I put on my dark suit, the one Ruth had picked for my retirement dinner. I polished my shoes. I wrapped the cedar recipe box in a blue dish towel and set it on the passenger seat of my old Buick. On the drive to Lake Alder Lodge, the snow came down, steady, thick and soft. The road along the lake looked like it had been erased halfway. I remember the wipers moving. I remember Ruth's box sliding a little on the seat whenever I turned. I remember thinking I should have put it in the back. Small things. A man who notices small things should not ignore them when they begin to feel like warnings. The lodge was bright against the dark trees. I parked near the side because the main lot was full of SUVs and pickup trucks with clean tires. Inside, the air smelled like roasted meat, perfume, and pine candles. A young volunteer took my coat. I kept the recipe box under my arm. Miles saw it before he saw me. His smile tightened. Dad, he said, coming over with a camera-ready look on his face. You brought that? Nora asked me to. His eyes moved around the room, checking who had heard. That old thing should have stayed home. It was your mother's. I know what it was. That was how he said it. Not what it is. What it was. Elise stepped beside him, her hand sliding onto his arm. Harold, you look tired. Are you sure you're up for tonight? I drove myself here. That's what worries us, she said. Sweet as sugar stirred into poison. Before I could answer, Nora appeared behind her mother. She wore a dark green dress and white tights. Her hair had been curled too tight, and one curl was stuck to her wet cheek. When she saw the box, her whole face changed. Grandpa, she breathed. She reached for it, but Elise's hand caught her wrist. Not now, Elise said. Nora pulled back like she had been burned. I looked at Miles. He looked away. That was the first moment I understood this night was not about charity. It was about control. Dinner passed slowly. People came to my table and told me what a fine son I had. One woman I barely knew squeezed my shoulder and said, You must sleep well knowing Miles is taking care of everything. I looked across the room at Nora sitting between her parents, her hands folded in her lap, not eating. No, I said quietly. I don't sleep much at all. The woman laughed because she thought I was joking. After dessert, Miles walked to the small stage. Behind him, a screen showed pictures of elderly people smiling with blankets on their knees. Then Ruth's photo appeared. It was the library photo, the one where she was holding a stack of children's books and trying not to smile. My throat closed. Miles began with all the right words. My mother believed care was not a business, it was a duty. People nodded. She taught me that vulnerable people deserve protection, even when they do not understand they need it. That line landed strangely in my stomach. Miles looked at me, then he said, Tonight, I want to honor her, by making a difficult family announcement. The room went quiet. I felt every eye turn. Miles lowered his voice, the way men do when they want cruelty to sound holy. My father, Harold, has been struggling more than he wants to admit. A few people glanced at me with pity. He's proud. Many men of his generation are, but pride can become dangerous. Bills unpaid, medication forgotten, confusion while driving, emotional attachment to objects that keep him trapped in grief. My hands went cold. Nora's head snapped up. Miles continued. As a family, we've decided that Dad will be moving into a wonderful assisted care residence next week. Silver Harbor will oversee the transition at no cost. His home will be handled responsibly, and Ruth's legacy will support this foundation. Handled responsibly. His home, Ruth's legacy. I pushed my chair back. Miles, I said. He smiled sadly at the crowd. This is hard for him. I never agreed to any of that. A murmur moved through the room. Elise stood. Harold, honey. This is not the place. I looked at Nora. Tears were running down her face. Miles stepped off the stage and came toward me. Dad, please don't make this worse. You're lying. That was the first time I had ever said those words to my son in public. His face changed for half a second. Not much. Just enough for me to see the boy he had buried under the suit. Then he looked at the recipe box in my arms. That box, he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, is exactly what I'm talking about. He took it from me. I did not expect him to. That is the truth. I had carried mailbags through drug houses, fraud offices, and back rooms where men twice my size shouted in my face. But I did not expect my son to snatch his mother's recipe box out of my hands like garbage. Nora cried. Dad, no. Miles held the box up. My mother has been gone for years, he said. But Dad carries this around like it's a legal document. He hides things in it, talks to it, makes a child participate in grief rituals. This is not love. This is decline. Give it back, I said. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. Sit down, or I'll have them call medical transport tonight. Then he turned and walked toward the service door. I followed. The room blurred around me. I heard chairs scrape. I heard Elise whispering to someone that I had not been myself lately. I heard Nora sob. That's Grandma's. Miles pushed through the side door into the service hall, then out into the loading area where snow swirled under yellow lights. A green donation trailer sat near the dumpsters, filled with old decorations, broken chairs, and boxes from the event. He lifted Ruth's cedar box and threw it inside. It hit something metal. The sound cracked through me. I climbed into the trailer after it. My dress shoes slipped on snow and cardboard. I found the box wedged under a bent music stand. The lid had popped open. Recipe cards had spilled like little white birds. Miles stood below, watching me struggle. Look at yourself, he said. This is exactly why people believe me. I gathered the cards with numb fingers. One card had fallen face up. First Snow Cocoa, Ruth's handwriting. I pressed it to my chest. When I climbed down, Miles took my arm. Not hard enough to bruise where anyone could see. Hard enough to tell me he had stopped pretending. You're coming with me, he said. I want Nora. Nora is none of your concern right now. She called me. His jaw flexed. What did she say? I looked at him then. Really looked. There was fear in his eyes. Not anger, not annoyance, fear. That was the first clue. He drove me away from the lodge in his SUV. My coat was still inside. My phone was in the coat pocket. The recipe box sat on my lap. Miles did not turn on the heated seat. He did not speak for 5 miles. Snow hit the windshield so hard it looked like sparks. Finally, I said, pull over at my house. You're not going home tonight. Where are you taking me? To a place where you can't ruin things. I stared at him. He gave a short laugh with no humor in it. You always did think silence made you noble. Mom thought so too, but silence is just weakness with manners. That's not you talking. Yes, Dad, it is. You just never listened. He turned off the main road onto Old Quarry Road, a service route that ran behind the frozen gravel pits. Nobody used it in winter except plow crews and teenagers looking for trouble. My stomach tightened. Miles. He kept driving. What did Nora tell you? He asked again. Why are you afraid of an 11-year-old girl? He slammed the brakes. The SUV slid sideways a few feet before stopping near the old county road sign. White wind shook the vehicle. He turned to me, and for the first time that night, he let the mask fall completely. I built everything while you sat in that house worshiping a woman, he said. Everything. The company, the foundation, the partnerships. And I am not letting you or that girl or Mom's little paper games destroy it. What paper games? He grabbed the recipe box from my lap. I held on. For a moment we pulled against each other like two strangers fighting over something at a yard sale. Then the lid snapped. A corner of the blue snowflake broke off. I made a sound I had not made since Ruth died. Miles froze just for a second. Then he shoved the box back into my chest. "Keep it," he said. "Freeze with it." He got out, walked around, opened my door, and pulled me into the storm. I stumbled onto the shoulder. He tossed the box down at my feet. The wind took several cards and scattered them across the snow. "Miles, don't do this." He leaned close. Snow gathered on his dark hair. "You wandered away from the event confused," he said. "That's what everyone will understand. You've been getting worse. Maybe they'll find you, maybe they won't. Either way, by morning, the tracks are covered." Then he smiled. Not big, not dramatic. A tired, ugly little smile. Mom should have burned that box. He got back in the SUV and drove away. For a few seconds I could not move. The cold entered me fast. It went through my shirt, through my skin, into my bones. I bent down and picked up the recipe box. The broken lid hung crooked. Cards lay in the snow around me. I tried to gather them, but my fingers were already stiff. I remember thinking of Ruth, not in a grand way, not with music or light. I thought of her standing in our kitchen in wool socks, tapping a spoon on the edge of a pot, saying, "Harold, don't forget the pinch of salt. Sweetness needs something to stand against." I laughed once. The sound disappeared in the wind. Then headlights appeared. Not red-white. They came slowly through the snow, steady, controlled, not like someone lost. A dark truck stopped 20 feet from me. The driver got out wearing a black winter coat and a knit cap. Big man, broad shoulders, gray beard. He moved like a person trained not to waste motion. He did not ask me what happened. He said, "Mr. Mercer, my name is Malcolm Price. Ruth sent me." I thought I had heard wrong. "What?" He walked closer, opened his coat, and wrapped a heavy blanket around my shoulders. "Your wife hired me 3 years ago," he said. "She told me if the first snow came and your son got you alone, I was to stay close." The cold, the shock, the betrayal, all of it bent around those words. "Ruth sent me." I looked down at the broken recipe box in my hands. Malcolm followed my eyes. "Did he damage it?" I nodded. Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Then we're late," he said. But not too late. He helped me into the truck. The heat hit my face and made my eyes burn. He gave me gloves. He picked up every recipe card he could find with a flashlight, even crawling halfway into the ditch to get one caught in dead grass. He handled them carefully, as if they were evidence, which I would learn. They were. He drove me not to my house, not to the hospital, but to a small roadside motel outside town. A woman in a red parka was waiting in the office. She had silver hair cut to her chin and a leather folder under one arm. I knew her, Leona Voss, Ruth's friend from the library board, also an attorney. "Harold," she said, and her voice broke when she saw me. I stood there wrapped in Malcolm's blanket, holding Ruth's broken box like a child. "Did you know?" I asked. Leona looked at the snow melting off my sleeves. I knew enough to be afraid. That night they put me in room 12. Malcolm checked the window locks and stood outside while Leona made tea with water from the motel coffee maker. My hands shook too hard to hold the cup. Leona sat across from me and placed Ruth's recipe box on the small table. "I need you to listen carefully," she said. "Miles is going to claim you are missing, confused, or unstable. He may already be doing it. Do not call him. Do not go home. Do not speak to police without me present unless you are in immediate danger. That's my son. I know. He left me to die." Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "Yes. A man can live through a war zone and still be unprepared for one sentence." "Yes." I looked at the box. "How did Ruth know?" Leona opened her folder. "Because she watched him take control one paper at a time. Inside were copies, not originals." Ruth had always believed in copies. There was a bank statement with yellow highlights, a mail forwarding confirmation, a senior residence pre-admission form, a document titled Durable Power of Attorney. My signature was on it. I had never signed it. I picked up the page. The signature looked good at a glance. But not to me. My H always leaned forward, because my father had taught me to write fast in a feed store ledger. This H leaned back. The loop on the M was wrong. The pressure was wrong. Whoever copied it had traced the shape but not the habit. "That's not mine," I said. "I know," Leona replied. I looked at her. "How?" She reached into Ruth's box and removed the first snow cocoa card. It was damp at one corner from the roadside. She turned it over. On the back, in Ruth's handwriting, were 6 words I had never seen. Harold notices signatures. "Start there." I stopped breathing for a moment. Leona touched the edge of the card. She wrote that 2 months before she died. I stared at Ruth's handwriting until it blurred. There are moments when grief changes shape. For 3 years, mine had been a closed door. That night, it opened a crack, and behind it was not only sorrow. It was Ruth still working. Ruth still protecting. Ruth still telling me where to look. Leona said, "There is more." From the bottom of the recipe box, beneath the stack of cards, she lifted the thin wooden panel I had never known was removable. Under it was a small brass key taped flat, a folded bank receipt, and a strip of paper with numbers. Threcker 19, Northern Lakes Credit Union. Ask for Maribel. I laughed softly, not because anything was funny, but because that was Ruth. She had hidden a safe deposit clue inside a recipe box I had touched 100 times. The truth had been sitting beside my coffee mugs all along. Leona leaned forward. "Harold, tomorrow morning, Miles intends to file emergency guardianship papers over you. He also has a closing scheduled for your house at 10 on Monday. He is claiming you agreed to move into a memory care unit and allow the proceeds to fund Ruth's memorial program. My house is not for sale. The buyer believes it is." I felt my heartbeat in my neck. "And Nora?" Leona's face changed. "That scared me more than the papers. What about Nora?" She opened another page. This one was from a private residential school in Montana. Winter behavioral placement. Admission date. Monday. Transport arranged. "Nora is being moved out of state in less than 48 hours, Leona said. I stood too fast. The room tilted. "No." Malcolm opened the door from outside. "You all right?" I put a hand on the wall. Leona said, "Sit, Harold." "No. He cannot send her away. He can if Elise signs and no one challenges it." "Why would he?" Leona looked at Ruth's box. "Because Nora knows something, or has something." That sentence stayed in the room long after she said it. I did not sleep that night. I lay on the motel bed in my dress shirt under 2 blankets while Malcolm sat in a chair by the window. I told him he did not have to stay inside. He said, "Ruth paid for inside." He did not explain much at first. Men like Malcolm rarely do unless they have to. He had been a state trooper, then worked private protection for witnesses and elderly clients in civil cases. Ruth hired him after she saw Miles shove me against the kitchen counter during an argument I had never told anyone about. It had happened 8 months before Ruth died. Miles wanted me to sign papers allowing him to help manage our accounts. I refused. He said I was making things hard on everyone. Ruth came in from the hallway just as he grabbed my shoulder and pushed me back. It was not much. Not enough to fall. Not enough to call it violence if you were trying to protect your son from what he was becoming. But Ruth saw. And Ruth did not protect the lie. She protected me. She called me the next day, Malcolm said. Said her husband was too proud to admit danger and too loyal to recognize it in his own blood. That sounds like her. She also said you would be mad when you found out. I am, he nodded. Good. Angry men stay warm. At dawn, Leona drove us to Northern Lakes Credit Union. The snow had stopped, but the world outside looked stunned and white. Plows had carved the streets into narrow lanes. My shoes were still damp, so Malcolm had brought me boots from somewhere. I did not ask where. He seemed like a man who knew how to produce boots, coffee, and trouble when needed. At the credit union, we asked for Maribel. She was a small woman with dark hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain. When she saw Leona, she did not smile. You're here for drawer 19, she said. Leona nodded. Maribel looked at me. I'm sorry about Ruth, she said. She made me promise I would only open it when you came in person with the Coco card. I took the card from my pocket. Maribel led us into a private room and brought a narrow metal drawer. She used her key. I used the brass key from the recipe box. Inside was not money, it was Ruth. Not her body, of course. Not even her voice at first, but her order, her care, her way of preparing for winter, before anyone else admitted it was coming. There were envelopes labeled in her handwriting. Mail, Nora Miles. I've Harold is called confused. If I am gone before first snow. My hands hovered over them. I did not want to open them, and I had to open them. Leona chose the first envelope, mail. Inside were copies of postal forwarding forms. 3 of them, 1 sent 6 months before Ruth died, 2 sent after. Each redirected certain financial mail from my address to a private mailbox, registered to Silver Harbor Solutions. The signature used my name. The contact phone number was Miles's assistant. My old training came back like a door unlocking. This one is impossible, I said. Leona watched me. It says I authorized it on March 12th. I was at Abbott Hospital with Ruth all day. She had the lung procedure. Maribel reached into the drawer and took out a visitor badge sealed in a plastic sleeve. Ruth had saved my hospital visitor badge from that day. There was also a parking receipt. "Start there," she had written on a sticky note. I sat back. Ruth had known how to build a case. The Nora envelope hurt worse. School counselor notes. Copies of drawings. A handwritten statement from Ruth describing bruises on Nora's arms that Elise had blamed on clumsiness. A record of missed therapy appointments that Miles billed to a trust account anyway. A letter from Nora to Ruth, written in crooked pencil. "Grandma, Dad says I have to stop talking about the paper because it makes people sad. I hid it in the bird book. Please don't tell." I could not speak. Leona gently removed the letter from my hand. "What paper?" I asked. "That's what we need to find." The Miles envelope contained bank transfers from something called the Ruth Mercer Children's Literacy Trust. I knew that trust. Ruth had set it up small, with life insurance money and savings, to support school libraries and Nora's education. Miles had agreed to manage the business side after Ruth got sick. He had moved nearly $200,000 through consulting fees, placement retainers, and foundation expenses. His own company had been paid by his mother's trust. The last envelope was thick. "I've Harold," is called confused. Inside were copies of my medical records, including a cognitive evaluation I had supposedly failed. I had never taken it. The doctor's signature belonged to a man named Dr. Brant Keller, whose clinic was 3 counties away. Attached was a telehealth intake note saying my son reported memory loss, paranoia, unsafe driving, emotional fixation, and possible delusions surrounding my deceased wife. My son had turned grief into a diagnosis. There are betrayals that make you angry. Then there are betrayals that make the world feel unsafe. I had spent my life trusting records, forms, systems, dates, signatures, the clean little bones of truth. Miles had taken those bones and rearranged them into a cage. And before I tell you what was inside that file, let me ask you something. If your own child tried to erase everything your late wife built, would you stay quiet or would you fight? I wanted to say I fought right away. I did not. I sat in that credit union room with my dead wife's papers spread out in front of me, and I cried like an old fool. Not loud, just tears I could not stop. Maribel turned away to give me dignity. Malcolm looked at the door. Leona waited. That is what good people do when a man breaks. They do not rush to patch him for their own comfort. They sit nearby and let him remember he is still human. When I could speak again, I asked, "Where is Ruth's message?" Leona pointed to a small padded envelope at the bottom of the drawer. Inside was an old digital voice recorder. A yellow note was wrapped around it. "Play only after first snow." My fingers shook as I pressed the button. Ruth's voice filled the room, thin from illness. "Still, Ruth. Harold, if you are hearing this, I am sorry. I wanted to be wrong. I prayed to be wrong. I know you love Miles. I love him too. That is why this is going to hurt." A sound came from my throat that did not feel like mine. Ruth continued. "He is in debt, more than he admits. Not gambling, not drugs, not one simple thing people can point at. It is pride, expansion loans, bad investments. Men promising him bigger rooms to stand in. He has been using my trust, and he has been frightening Nora. She heard him arguing with a man named Calder about forged capacity papers. She found a copy. She hid it in my bird book before I went to the hospital." Ruth coughed, then breathed. "If I do not make it find the bird book, protect Nora. Protect yourself. Do not confront Miles alone. Leona has the legal road. Malcolm has the physical road. You, my love, have the paper road." There was a pause, then her voice softened. "And Harold, do not let shame make you quiet. There is no shame in being betrayed. The shame belongs to the hand that did it." The recording ended. No one moved. I closed my eyes. For 3 years I had thought Ruth left me with an empty house. She had left me a map. We went to my house that afternoon. Not through the front, Malcolm. Parked 2 blocks away. And we walked along the alley behind the garages. My house sat at the end of Maple Finch Lane, pale yellow with white trim, the porch light still on from the night before. Ruth had insisted on that porch light. "Nobody should come home to a dark door," she used to say. There were fresh tire marks in the driveway. Miles's SUV. Malcolm put a hand out, stopping me before I stepped forward. "Wait." He crouched near the tracks. I almost smiled despite everything. A bodyguard looking at tire marks. A retired postal inspector looking at the mailbox. We each had our church. The mailbox door hung open. That was wrong. I always closed it. Inside was nothing but a grocery flyer. But under the flag, tucked behind the metal bracket, was a torn strip of paper, A delivery notice. Certified mail. Attempted delivery the day before. Recipient unavailable. Sender. Alder County Probate Court. Miles had not wanted me to see court mail. I showed Leona. Her mouth tightened. He filed sooner than we thought. Inside the house, Ruth's shelf was empty where the recipe box usually sat. Seeing that empty spot nearly brought me to my knees. It was strange. The box was in my hands, yet the missing shape of it hurt. We found the bird book in Ruth's reading room. She had kept field guides on the lower shelf because Nora liked to sit on the rug and copy pictures. Birds of the upper Midwest, warblers, owls, winter finches. The book Ruth meant was an old illustrated guide with a cracked spine. I opened it carefully. Between the pages for the evening grosbeak and the pine siskin was a folded sheet of paper, pressed flat for years. It was not a will. It was not a deed. It was worse for Miles, a photocopy of a contract between Silver Harbor Solutions and a company called Calder Medical Review Services. Subject: expedited cognitive incapacity documentation, fee schedule, rush affidavits, Ryan assessment packages. At the bottom, in Miles's handwriting, were the words, "Need father and Nora handled before Q1 audit." Nora had found that an 11-year-old girl had been carrying a secret big enough to ruin her father. No wonder they wanted her gone. Behind the contract was another sheet. A list of names, dates, and amounts. Ruth had written at the top, families Miles pressured. There were 8 names. Elderly clients whose homes had been sold after Silver Harbor arranged placement. I knew 3 from town. 1 had died the previous winter. 1 had moved to Florida, people said. 1 had a daughter who cried at church every Sunday and stopped talking when I sat near her, by sunset. I understood something that made the room colder than the storm. This was not just about my house. Miles had built a business on making old people disappear politely. And I was not his first target. The counterattack began before dinner. My landline rang. I let Leona answer. She listened, said only, "This is attorney Leona Voss. All communication regarding Mr. Mercer goes through me now," and hung up. Then my neighbor Patty knocked on the back door, crying. "Harold, there are police at the front," she said. "Miles told them you were taken by some man." Malcolm looked almost bored. Right on time. 2 officers came in, young ones. Cold faces, not unkind. They said Miles had reported me missing and possibly exploited by an unknown male. Elise had told them I was confused after a public episode and had left with a stranger. Leona gave them her card. I gave them my statement. Malcolm gave them his license and contract. Then Leona showed them the photo Malcolm had taken of me on Old Quarry Road, wrapped in a blanket, snow on my shirt, no coat. The younger officer's expression changed. "Your son left you there?" I said. "Yes." He wrote that down, Paper Road. Miles called again while the police were still there. This time Leona put it on speaker after telling him he was being recorded. His voice came through smooth and wounded. "Dad, thank God. We've been terrified." I looked at Leona. She nodded. I said, "You left me on Old Quarry Road." A pause. "What, Dad? No. You got out of the car. You were agitated. You threw your mother's recipe box into a donation trailer." Another pause. "See, this is exactly what I mean. You're fixated on that box." Officer Young wrote faster. Miles sighed. "Dad, I'm coming over." "No," Leona said. "You are not. Who is this? You know who I am, Miles." The softness left his voice. "Leona, I should have guessed. You should have. You are interfering with a family medical matter, and you are speaking on a recorded line after abandoning an elder in hazardous conditions." Silence. Then Miles said 7 words I still hear when winter wind hits my window. "You have no idea what she hid." He hung up. The officers looked at me. I looked at Ruth's box. No, I thought. But I am starting to. That night, Malcolm stayed in his truck outside my house. Leona slept in Ruth's reading chair with a blanket over her legs, refusing to leave. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by documents, and made Ruth's cocoa with a broken recipe card propped against the sugar jar. I used whole milk. I added vanilla. I added cinnamon. I added the pinch of salt. When the cocoa warmed, the house smelled like the first years of our marriage. Like Miles at 6 with chocolate on his upper lip. Like Ruth humming near the stove. Like a world where love did not yet require evidence. I poured 4 mugs out of habit. 1 for me. 1 for Ruth. 1 for Nora. 1 for the son I used to have. I poured Miles's down the sink. Then I opened the last thing from drawer 19. A sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a single photograph. Ruth and Nora sitting at the library craft table, both smiling down at something between them. On the back, Ruth had written. She made a folder called Yellow Window. She said it is where the truth lives. Yellow window, I knew that phrase. Nora's drawings. Every house she drew had one yellow window. We searched Ruth's reading room until after midnight. No folder. We looked behind books, under cushions, inside craft bins. Nothing. At 1:15 in the morning, my old postal brain finally did what it should have done earlier. A child hiding something from adults does not hide it where adults look. She hides it where she feels safe. I went to the kitchen pantry. On the bottom shelf, behind the flour tin, was an old metal cookie tin with painted cardinals. Ruth used to keep stale crackers in it for Nora to feed the ducks. Inside was a folder made of yellow construction paper. A child's handwriting on the front. Ural window, do not give to Dad. I sat on the floor before opening it. Some folders feel heavier than their paper. Inside were drawings at first. Houses. A girl in a green dress. A man with no eyes. A black car. An old woman in a hospital bed. A box with a blue snowflake. Then came the notes. Nora had written down things she overheard. Dad said Grandpa has to look crazy. Mom said the doctor paper costs extra. Dad said Grandma kept copies like a rat. Mr. Calder said no body, no fight. I don't know what that means. The last note was dated 2 weeks before Ruth died. Grandma told me if I get scared, hide near Grandpa's porch light. I pressed the folder to my chest. Leona whispered, God help that child. At the very back was a small flash drive, taped under a drawing of a yellow window. Not a camera-broken story. Not some grand secret video from a taxi driver. A child's flash drive with a sticker shaped like a rabbit bean. Nora's stuffed rabbit. We plugged it into Leona's laptop. There were 3 audio files. The first was mostly muffled. Ruth breathing. Hospital machines. Miles's voice in the room. He thought Ruth was asleep. Can't keep floating both houses in the foundation, he said. If Dad signs, fine. If not, we move him through capacity. Calder says it's clean. Elise answered, and Nora? She's a child. She talks. Then she gets treatment. She'll hate us. She already does. The second file was shorter. Miles again. Mom kept copies somewhere. Find the recipe box when she dies. She put everything in that stupid box. Elise said. Your father keeps it beside the mugs. Miles said. Then he'll hand me the knife without knowing it. I looked at the broken cedar box. No, son. She handed me the shield. The third file was Ruth's voice, weak but clear. Nora, sweetheart, if you are recording this by accident, don't be scared. If you are recording because you know grown-ups are lying, then listen to Grandma. Truth is not tattling. Truth is how we open locked doors. Nora sniffled on the recording. Is Grandpa in trouble? Ruth said. Maybe. But your grandpa knows how to follow paper. Dad says Grandpa is old. Old trees still know where their roots are. I covered my face. Leona stopped the audio. Nobody said anything for a long time. At 6 in the morning, we learned Miles had pulled Nora from school the day before, claiming a family emergency. At 7, Patty called to say Elise's sister had posted online asking for prayers because Nora is entering a treatment program after a difficult mental health crisis. They were preparing the story. The transport to Montana was scheduled for Monday at noon. The house closing was Monday at 10. It was Saturday morning, 49 hours. Leona filed for an emergency injunction and protection order. She also contacted the county attorney, Adult Protective Services, Child Protection, and a judge she knew only through court filings, not favors. Good lawyers do not promise miracles. They build bridges before the flood reaches the road. Malcolm drove me to the police station to give a full statement. On the way, we passed Lake Alder Lodge. The donation trailer was gone. I said, pull over. Malcolm did not ask why. We drove behind the lodge. The loading area was plowed now, but bits of cardboard and trash stuck from the snowbanks. I stood where Miles had thrown the box. In daylight, it looked smaller. Cruel places often do. A kitchen worker came out for a smoke. She recognized me and looked uncomfortable. You were there last night, I said. She nodded. Did you see my son throw the box? Her eyes shifted to Malcolm. He held up both hands. I'm just standing. She took a drag from her cigarette. I saw, she said. Would you tell police? She laughed once, bitter. Against Mr. Mercer? He's Mr. Mercer too, Malcolm said. That made her look at me differently. I said, I am not asking you to fight my son. I am asking you to tell the truth about a wooden box. She stared at the snow. Then she said, I recorded part of it. My heart kicked. She pulled out her phone. The video was shaky, taken through the service door window. There was no sound at first. Then the door opened and Miles's voice came clear enough. This is exactly why people believe me. Then he threw Ruth's box into the trailer. Nora's crying could be heard faintly inside. The worker's name was Talia Brooks. She said Miles had refused to pay overtime to lodge staff after using them for foundation events. She did not like him. That helped, but anger alone does not make someone brave. Still, she emailed the video to Leona before her cigarette was finished. One more piece. At the police station, Miles's story was already waiting for us. He had filed a report saying I had become combative, wandered out into the storm, and possibly fabricated abandonment due to cognitive decline. Elise had added that I was obsessed with dead wife messages and had recently accused them of theft without basis. Then Miles made his mistake. He gave police a timeline. He said I left the lodge at 9:20 p.m. He said he searched for me until 10:10. He said he never drove me anywhere, but Malcolm's truck dashcam showed Miles's SUV passing Old Quarry Road at 9:47 p.m., and the lodge worker's video was time-stamped 9:31. And my missing coat had been found still hanging in the lodge check room at 10:15. Old cases came back to me. The small math of lying. A false story can survive emotion. It cannot survive clocks. By Saturday evening, Leona had enough to get a temporary order, preventing sale of my house until Monday's emergency hearing. Miles responded by calling a family meeting, not officially. Not legally, socially. He invited my sister Carol, 2 cousins, Elise's parents, Pastor Whitcomb, 3 foundation board members, and half the people whose opinions mattered in town. He held it at the church fellowship hall after Sunday service. Leona told me not to go. Malcolm said, "Bad idea. Not alone, never alone again." The fellowship hall smelled like coffee, wet wool, and old hymnals. Folding chairs had been arranged in a half circle. Miles stood near the front with Elise beside him. Nora was not there. That told me everything. People turned when I walked in with Leona on one side, and Malcolm on the other. My sister Carol covered her mouth like she had seen a ghost. Miles gave a tired smile. "Dad, I'm glad you came." "No, you're not." A few people shifted. Elise stepped forward. "Harold, we all love you. This gathering is not to attack you." "Then where is Nora?" Her face tightened. "She's resting." "Where?" Miles said. "This is what we mean. Your fixation on Nora is unhealthy." I looked around the room. Most people would rather believe a clean lie than a messy truth. I could see it in their faces. They wanted this to be a sad family medical issue. They wanted Miles to be noble. They wanted me to be confused, because confusion does not require anyone else to be guilty. Pastor Whitcomb cleared his throat. "Harold, maybe it would help if you allowed Miles to explain the plan." "The plan where he sells my house?" Miles sighed. "Dad, the plan where he sends Nora to Montana?" Elise's mother gasped softly, but Elise shot her a look. Miles folded his hands. "Nora is receiving care recommended by professionals. Dad is twisting private family matters." Leona said, "Which professionals? This is not a courtroom." "Not yet," she said. Miles's eyes flashed. Then he turned to the others with that wounded son face. "Do you all see? This is what we've been living with. Suspicion. Accusations. My father was a postal inspector, so now every document is a conspiracy. Every loving decision is fraud. He has fallen into paranoia, and this attorney is encouraging it." Carol began crying. "Harold," she said, "why didn't you tell me you were this bad? That hurt more than I expected." "I'm not bad, Carol." Miles stepped closer. "Dad, if you sign the care agreement today, I won't pursue full guardianship. We can keep this private. We can protect your dignity." There it was, fake mercy with a hook inside. "And if I don't," his voice lowered, "then tomorrow morning, every document comes out. The doctor's report, the driving concerns, the incident last night. Nora's therapist will hear how you destabilized her. You will lose anyway, but you'll lose loudly." I looked at the people in that room. Then I looked at the church basement windows, fogged from all those warm bodies hiding from winter. For most of my life, I had avoided public shame. I thought dignity meant not letting people see your wounds. Ruth knew better. "Do not let shame make you quiet." I took the broken recipe box from the cloth bag Malcolm carried. A few people leaned forward. Miles's face hardened. "Put that thing away." I set it on the nearest table. "No." I opened it and took out the first Snow Cocoa card. "This was your mother's handwriting," I said. His mouth became a line. "You are embarrassing yourself." "No. You are embarrassed because she left me instructions." I turned the card around so the room could see the back. Harold notices signatures. "Start there." Miles laughed. "A recipe card? That is your proof?" "No," I said. "It was my beginning." Leona touched my arm. A warning, not too much. "Not here." She was right. The church was not the place to try the case. But it was the place where Miles had tried to bury me socially. So I gave him one shovel of truth. I looked at Pastor Whitcomb. Last Friday night, my son left me without a coat on Old Quarry Road during a snowstorm. Police have the statement. They have the timestamps. They have a witness. The room went still. Miles said, "That is not true." Malcolm stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. "I pulled Mr. Mercer off that road at 9:58 p.m. I have dashcam, GPS, and body temperature records from the clinic." Elise whispered, "This is insane." For the first time, people looked at Miles and did not know what to believe. That was enough. Leona leaned close to me. "We leave now." As we turned, I heard Nora. Not her voice in the room. A sound from the hallway, a small cough. I knew it. Grandfathers know the sounds children make when they are trying not to cry. I moved before anyone could stop me. "Nora?" Elise rushed after me. "Harold, don't." I opened the hallway door. Nora stood beside the coat rack in a blue winter coat, too thin for the weather, clutching Bean the rabbit to her chest. Her eyes were swollen. A packed backpack sat by her feet. "Nora," I said. She looked at the room behind me, then at Miles. Her lips trembled. "Grandpa, am I bad paperwork too?" The fellowship hall went silent, not quiet. Silent. Miles closed his eyes, just for a second, like a man hearing a lock click shut. I knelt slowly because my knees are not what they used to be. "No, sweetheart," I said. "You are not paperwork. You are a child." She looked at the recipe box in my hand. "Did Dad break Grandma's snowflake?" I nodded. Tears fell down her face. "I tried to keep the yellow window safe." "You did. Are they sending me away because I told?" Elise said sharply. "Nora, stop." Nora flinched. That flinch did more than any document could have done in that room. Pastor Whitcomb stepped back from Miles. Carol whispered, "Oh my God." Miles moved toward Nora, but Malcolm stepped between them, not touching him, just becoming a wall. Miles looked at him with pure hatred. "You have no authority." Malcolm said, "Try me." Leona called the emergency child protection number from the hallway. Miles said we were kidnapping his daughter. Leona said Nora was reporting fear of retaliation and out-of-state removal pending court review. The next hour was chaos, but quiet chaos. The kind that happens in churches where people are too polite to admit evil has entered the fellowship hall. 2 officers came. A child protection worker arrived. Nora was interviewed in Pastor Whitcomb's office, with Leona present and Elise shouting outside until an officer told her to sit down. Nora did not come home with me that night. The law moves carefully with children, as it should. But she was not sent home with Miles either. She was placed overnight with my sister Carol, who looked at me like she had aged 10 years in one afternoon. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't either," I said. That was not fully true. Some part of me had known, some part had chosen grief over confrontation. That is a hard confession, but an honest story needs hard confessions. Monday morning came gray and bitter cold. The emergency hearing was held in a county courtroom with old wood benches and a clock that ticked too loudly. Outside the windows, snow slid from the roof in soft thumps. Inside, every breath felt measured. Miles arrived in a Navy suit with Elise beside him, and a lawyer named Conrad Bell, a man known for making rich people sound injured. Miles looked tired but composed. He gave me one sad nod for the room. Nora sat with Carol and a child advocate near the back. She held Bean under her coat like a secret heartbeat. Malcolm stood by the door, not because anyone asked him to, because Ruth paid for inside. Judge Harlan was a woman in her 60s, with short white hair and reading glasses low on her nose. She had the kind of face that made people choose their words carefully. The matter began as 3 matters tied together. My capacity, the attempted sale of my home, and Nora's emergency protection. Miles's lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of a devoted son trying to manage a tragic decline. He said I had become paranoid after Ruth's death. He said I had harassed my granddaughter with grief rituals. He said I had refused medical evaluation. He said the house sale was responsible financial planning. He said Nora's placement was recommended due to emotional instability worsened by my interference. The lies sounded clean. That is the danger of practiced men. They can sweep dirt into corners you cannot see from the doorway. Then Leona stood. She did not perform. She did not thunder. She simply opened a binder. "Your Honor," she said, "Mr. Mercer spent 31 years investigating mail fraud, identity theft, and forged authorization documents. The respondents built their plan around making his expertise look like a symptom." Judge Harlan looked at me for the first time. I kept my hands folded. Leona began with the road, police statement, clinic record, Weather report. Lodge coat check record. Malcolm's dashcam. Talia's video of Miles throwing Ruth's box into the donation trailer. Miles stared straight ahead. On the video, his voice sounded smaller than I remembered. This is exactly why people believe me. The judge watched it twice. Then Leona moved to the forged power of attorney. She placed my known signatures beside the disputed one. She showed the hospital parking receipt Ruth had saved. She showed the visitor badge from the day I supposedly signed a document in another town. Judge Harlan asked Miles's lawyer, "Was Mr. Mercer present before the notary?" Conrad Bell said. "We believe proper procedure was followed." Leona said, "The notary whose stamp appears on the document had reported that stamp missing 3 weeks earlier." Conrad's face changed. Miles looked at him. That was the second crack. Leona called Maribel from the credit union. She testified about drawer 19 and Ruth's sealed materials. She testified that Ruth had appeared of sound mind when depositing them. She testified that Ruth had been afraid of financial abuse. Then Leona played Ruth's recording. I did not look at Miles while Ruth spoke. I looked at Nora. When Ruth said, "Truth is not tattling," Nora pressed Bean against her mouth and cried silently. The judge removed her glasses. Courtrooms have their own weather. You can feel when pressure changes. Then came the contract with Calder Medical Review Services, expedited cognitive incapacity documentation, Dr. Brant Keller's telehealth report, the forged evaluation. Leona had reached Dr. Keller's office Sunday evening. The clinic's attorney had already sent a letter stating Dr. Keller never personally examined me, and that the file had been opened based on documents submitted by Silver Harbor Solutions. Calder Medical Review had been under state investigation. Miles's lawyer asked for a recess. Judge Harlan said, "Denied for now." Then Leona said, "Your Honor, this is where the child becomes central." Miles whispered something to Conrad. Conrad stood. "We object to dragging a minor into adult financial disputes." The judge looked at him over her glasses. This minor was scheduled for out-of-state transport today, was she not? Conrad sat down. Leona presented Nora's yellow folder. Not all of it. The court protected parts of it. But enough, the notes, the hidden contract, the audio files. Miles's voice filled the courtroom. "If Dad signs, fine. If not, we move him through capacity. Then Elise. And Nora? Then Miles. She's a child. Elise. She talks. Miles. Then she gets treatment." Nora began to shake. Carol put an arm around her. The judge's face did not change, but her hand stopped moving over her notes. Then came the final document, the one Ruth had hidden deepest. Leona removed a blue-backed packet from her binder. 3 months before her death, Ruth Mercer executed a trust protector directive for the Ruth Mercer Children's Literacy Trust and the Mercer Family Residence Preservation Account. It is not a will. It does not distribute property upon death. It appoints a protective fiduciary in the event of fraud, coercion, elder abandonment, or attempted removal of Nora Mercer from the state for the purpose of concealing financial misconduct. Miles turned pale. I had never seen that color leave him before. Leona continued. The directive was filed with Northern Lakes Credit Union, copied to Alder County Probate Court, and acknowledged by Miles Mercer in writing after Ruth confronted him about unauthorized withdrawals. She lifted one page. His signature is notarized. This one, we believe, is real. Miles's lawyer closed his eyes. I looked at my son. For 1 second, he looked like the boy at our kitchen table again. Caught, angry, afraid, wanting someone else to fix what he had broken. Then Leona read the triggering clause. If Miles Mercer attempts to isolate, institutionalize, medically mislabel, financially coerce, or physically endanger Harold Mercer, or attempts to remove Nora Mercer from Minnesota without review, while financial questions remain unresolved, his authority over trust assets is immediately suspended pending court supervision. Ruth had not left a sword, she had left a tripwire, and Miles had stepped on every inch of it. Judge Harlan asked Miles directly, "Mr. Mercer, did you sign acknowledgement of this directive?" Miles swallowed. "I signed many documents during my mother's illness. That is not an answer." He looked at Elise. Elise looked away. Finally, he said, "Yes, but under emotional pressure." Leona said, "Ruth was in hospice when he signed. She weighed 91 pounds. Judge Harlan looked at Miles for a long moment. Then Malcolm stepped forward as a witness. Conrad objected, but the judge allowed limited testimony. Malcolm stated his full name. Former state trooper. Licensed private protection specialist. Contracted by Ruth Mercer. Scope of service, welfare monitoring, emergency extraction, Court testimony if elder endangerment occurred. Then Leona asked, "Did Ruth Mercer tell you who she believed might endanger her husband?" "Yes." "Who?" "Miles Mercer." A sound moved through the courtroom. Small but sharp, Miles's hands curled on the table. Leona asked, "Did you expect to find Mr. Mercer on Old Quarry Road?" Malcolm said, "I hope not. Why were you nearby?" Mrs. Mercer gave me yearly trigger dates. First snow was one. Public events involving Silver Harbor were another. Both happened Friday. The judge wrote that down. Then Malcolm added something none of us expected, Mrs. Mercer also instructed me to retrieve the cedar recipe box if Mr. Mercer lost control of it, because she believed Mr. Miles Mercer would try to destroy it. Miles stood so fast his chair hit the wall. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "A recipe box? A bodyguard? Secret triggers? Do you people hear yourselves? She poisoned all of you against me from the grave." The judge said, "Sit down," but he was gone now. The mask had cracked too far. "My mother never respected me," he said, pointing at me. "He got to be the quiet hero. He got the house. He got her pity. I built something real, and she treated me like a thief over accounting details." Leona said softly, "$200,000 is not an accounting detail." Miles snapped. It was temporary. The room went still. His lawyer whispered, "Stop talking." But pride had him by the throat. "I was going to put it back after the expansion," Miles said. "Then she got sick, and Nora started snooping, and Dad wouldn't sign anything. Do you know what it's like to drag a family forward while an old man and a dead woman hold everything hostage?" There it was. Not the polished lie, the truth under it, ugly. Human. Small Judge Harlan leaned back. "Mr. Mercer, are you admitting you moved funds from the trust without authorization?" His lawyer stood. "Your Honor." Miles sat slowly, as if his bones had emptied. "I want counsel," he said. Leona closed her binder. The rest moved quickly, though it did not feel quick. The judge suspended Miles's authority over all trust assets. She froze the pending house sale. She ordered an independent review of Silver Harbor's dealings with my estate and Ruth's trust. She issued a temporary protective order preventing Miles and Elise from removing Nora from the state or contacting her outside supervised channels. She appointed a guardian ad litem for Nora and placed her temporarily with Carol, with my home approved for visitation after safety checks. As for me, the judge said there was no credible evidence of incapacity presented by Miles. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Mercer, do you understand the orders I have entered today?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you understand that further proceedings will follow?" "Yes, Mom." "Do you need anything else from this court today?" I looked back at Nora. She was watching me with Ruth's eyes. "Yes," I said. The judge waited. "I would like my granddaughter to know she did not do anything wrong." For the first time all morning, Judge Harlan's face softened. She turned toward Nora. "Miss Mercer, this court has heard nothing today that makes you responsible for any adult's choices. You did the right thing by keeping truth safe." Nora buried her face in Carol's side. Miles did not look at her. That told me what kind of father he had become. Justice did not end in that courtroom. It never does. People want one gavel and clean music, but real justice is paperwork after everyone goes home tired. Miles was investigated for financial exploitation, forgery, fraud, and child endangerment. Silver Harbor lost its contracts. Families came forward. Talia from the lodge testified. Maribel testified. Dr. Keller's clinic handed over records. Calder Medical Review became its own storm. Elise tried to claim she had only followed Miles's lead. Then Leona found emails where Elise discussed narrative management and making Nora's placement look therapeutic, not punitive. After that, her soft scarves did not help her much. Miles eventually took a plea on several charges. Not everything. Men with good lawyers rarely face everything. But enough. He lost his company. He lost access to trust funds. He lost the right to make decisions for Nora. He spent time in county jail before sentencing, then more under state supervision. He was ordered to repay what he stole, though money like that never comes back whole. People asked me if I felt satisfied. I never knew how to answer. Satisfied is what you feel after a good meal. What I felt was quieter. The knife had been removed. The wound still had to learn how to close. Nora came to live with me that spring after the court made a longer-term order. Carol helped. Leona helped. Malcolm still came by more than he admitted was professional. He said Ruth had paid through the year. I told him the year had passed. He said he was bad with calendars. Nora chose the small room at the back of the house, the one that used to be Ruth's sewing room. We painted one wall pale yellow, not bright. soft like a porch light through curtains. She put Bean on the bed and Ruth's bird guides on the shelf. For the first few weeks, she woke from nightmares and stood in my doorway without knocking. I never made her explain. I just got up, made warm milk or cocoa, and sat with her at the kitchen table. One night, she asked, "Do you hate Dad?" I looked at the steam rising from my mug. I hate what he did. That's not what I asked. Children know when adults try to walk around the truth. I said, some days I do. Some days I remember him at 7 years old with a scraped knee, and I don't know where to put the hate. She nodded like that made sense. Do I have to love him? No. Do I have to forgive him? No. Her eyes lifted to mine. Grandma would? I smiled sadly. Your grandma believed forgiveness was a door. She never said you had to open it while someone was still trying to burn the house down. Nora thought about that. Then she said, "Can we fix the box?" So we did, not perfectly. Some things should not be repaired so well that the damage disappears. That can become another kind of lie. I found a local woodworker named Mr. Ivers, who understood after I told him it had been Ruth's. He repaired the hinge, cleaned the water stain, and fitted the broken blue snowflake piece back into the lid with a thin silver seam around it. When he handed it back, he said, "Japanese folks call that kind of thing honoring the break. Makes it part of the story." I ran my thumb over the silver seam. That sounds like Ruth. The next first snow came late. November held its breath for weeks. The yard stayed brown. The sky stayed low. Nora checked the window every morning before school. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, while she was doing homework at the kitchen table, one white flake landed on the porch rail. Then another, then the whole world began again. Nora looked at me. I took Ruth's cedar recipe box from the shelf. The blue snowflake caught the kitchen light. The silver seam shone faintly. We made cocoa. She read the card aloud. Milk, cocoa, vanilla, cinnamon. Pinch of salt. I said, always the salt. Why? Your grandma said sweetness needs something to stand against. Nora stirred the pot. Outside, snow gathered on the porch steps. The yellow porch light came on automatically at dusk. Malcolm's truck was parked across the street, though he pretended he had only stopped by to return a shovel. Leona had sent cookies. Carol was coming for dinner. The house did not feel like before. That is important. Healing does not mean life goes back. It means love finds a new shape and fills what it can. After cocoa, Nora took out a fresh index card. She wrote in careful letters Ronra's first safe snow cocoa. Then she drew a little yellow window in the corner. She placed it in Ruth's box behind the old card. Grandpa, she said, do you think Grandma knew we'd be okay? I looked at the recipe box, at the porch light, at the child Ruth had protected with paper and courage, at the snow falling softly over a road where my son once left me to disappear. I think she knew we would need help, I said, and she made sure love arrived on time. Nora leaned against my side. For a while, we just watched the snow. I still think about Miles. Of course I do. Blood does not stop being blood because it poisons you. Some mornings I wake up angry. Some nights I remember the boy he was and grieve him like someone dead. Maybe one day he will understand what he broke. Maybe he will not. But I have learned something late in life. You can love someone and still lock the door. You can forgive someone in your heart and still testify in court. You can be old and still be dangerous to a lie. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought Ruth was gone because she was buried. They thought Nora was small because she was scared. They thought a broken recipe box was just a broken recipe box. They were wrong about all of us. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read those places like little porch lights in the dark. And if your own family has ever made you feel like your pain was confusion, or your memory was a burden, or your love was something to laugh at, remember this. Truth does not always arrive loud. Sometimes it waits in a child's drawing folder. Sometimes it hides behind a recipe card. Sometimes it drives through a snowstorm in a black truck because a woman who loved you refused to leave your safety to chance. And sometimes the thing they throw away is the very thing that brings them down. That first night on Old Quarry Road, I thought I had been abandoned. But I know better now. I was not alone in that snow. Ruth was there in every card. Nora was there in every hidden note. Justice was there in every signature. My son thought I was too old to read. And love was there, coming through the white dark, headlights steady, right on time.